Hey, there's the live button.
Hi.
There.
Yes.
That's
Hey,
awesome.
everybody. Hi. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm stoked for this. Live content's a little intimidating. Usually, like the podcasting thing, there's editors involved. So we'll see how this goes. I'll try not to swear too much.
Yeah. Cool. Who wants to go first?
This is exciting for me.
Great. Catherine, why don't you start and maybe introduce yourself to everybody, and then Chris and I can do the same.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. I'm Catherine Gonzalez. This is my first time on the other side of the podcasting sort of divide. I've never been a host, but been a guest on a few podcasts, including the Design Systems podcast, which is really fun. I was previously at DoorDash. I was the head of design infrastructure there, where I led design systems, both designers and engineers, prototypers and accessibility folks. And I started as their first designer and engineer way back in the day. So I'm, in the design systems space, but also doing a lot of design engineering stuff. And right now, just taking a break between figuring out what I want to do next.
Cool. The employment gap year. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds great. Chris, you want to take your turn?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. I'm Chris. I'm the host of the Design Systems podcast, CEO of Knapsack. Really excited for this collaboration. Christoph and I got talking actually while we were doing a podcast episode, and said, there needs to be some live content. I think what sparked the conversation was I was telling you that like we show audio or show video, but we don't record video when we do the podcast. And we're like, well, why not? Why wouldn't we do this with video? So here we are.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, for the context. And as of me, I am Christophe Kouzikis. I'm from Paris, France. I lived in the US for the last 9 years now. I have over 20 years of experience. I consider myself a hybrid, a little bit like Catherine. Half of my career is as a designer, the other half is as a front-end developer. And so I feel like I was doing design system even before it was called like that. I am the host of the Design System Social Club, and I'm also a mentor on ADP lists. I actually talk a lot. I think that's part of the reason why we're doing this today, or like the idea that I had is that I've done like close to 100 mentoring sessions now on ADP lists. I want to say a good 2/3 of those are actually about design systems and people asking me questions. What is also interesting is like it's spanning across 19 countries now, which is really cool. Like I love this platform for that. What's funny is that I think I talked to like one French guy. So French peeps, if you're interested in design system, you can definitely reach out to me. Like it kind of, it makes me sad a little bit to not talk more to French people and this kind of stuff. But and so that's me, and we're here to launch this brand new design system field guide. Maybe you talked a little bit, Chris, about it, but from my point of view, like this idea is really about doing this kind of office hours, right? Like having like 3, maybe 4. We're going to talk a little bit about that, but it's all about the community, giving back to the community. I feel also like being able to answer people's questions, but also have real talk and making it clear that we're all, like trying our best, but also like sometimes, like we're all struggling. We're all like, it's still like a brand new topic for a lot of people. And when you're in Silicon Valley, like I used to be, you feel like everybody's doing it, like everybody knows what we're talking about and things like that. But once you actually step outside of this bubble, things are different. There's a comment from Donnie that says that my last name is very French. It's actually Greek and kind of French, but it's a story for another time, I think. But anyway, so yes, the design system field guide, I feel like this is all about actually the people asking questions, but also maybe, like being able to drive, like topics, but just answering questions and maybe like going deeper in certain people struggle or challenges and stuff like that. right?
Yeah, and while we get this thing off the ground, like a part of it is intended to be kind of a fun way to connect with the community. Every time I meet somebody new in the design systems space, I get excited about it. Catherine, you and I met about almost exactly a year ago, actually, when we were talking about the Patterns Conference. And one of the wonderful things about Patterns was everybody's ability to be vulnerable and show their uncertainty about what the future holds. And so a lot of this is about surfacing that sort of vibe to the community. How do we make it so that this is a space where we talk pretty openly and honestly about our opinions, our thoughts, our concerns about the future of design systems. And then Christoph, connecting with you and having your idea to bring this live, I think it's great. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm excited to see where this goes, what guests, what questions, what sort of conversations we get to have together.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great. And maybe we can talk now a little bit more about how we are thinking about, like this format should be. I guess the first thing to say is that we're aiming at doing that monthly for somewhat like an hour long, maybe a little bit less, a little bit more, depending on what's happening. So that's the first thing. As we mentioned, I think the main thing, though, is that we're hoping to get live guests and like people that actually want to talk about, like one thing specific, so we can dive into it and like talk with them about like their particular use case, some kind of office hours where people can join. And yeah, apart from that, I guess we mentioned, we might want to have also like special guests every month. Obviously, for this first one, it's just us three, but there's probably like a fourth one joining us, once a month to talk and hear what they're working on and stuff like that, but also maybe answering questions from people following the live stream. And yeah, and I guess the last thing that we could talk about is anything new and noteworthy that you want to share. And so maybe we can do that now. Actually, anybody has something to talk about, like any exciting news that you want to talk about?
Yeah,
I think there's a couple of things.
There's a lot of conferences, it seems like, are happening between a few of us, and on a particular topic, I think AI and design systems. So it right before this conversation, I think Chris and I both figured out that we're basically talking about the same thing at two different conferences. So we're talking about AI and design systems, me at Config and Chris at Into DS. Is that right?
Yeah, Future of Design Systems is what it's called now, but the same sort of moniker.
So yeah, here's Catherine talk in config.
Yeah, if you scroll down a little bit. Basically my talk is more focused on how right now we're kind of in this interesting space in particularly design systems, but throughout the tech industry, and that I think there's a lot of things changing and a lot of uncertainty around, we've gone through a year with many layoffs in our industry and a lot of things changing, a lot of people trying to figure out where they fit into different companies and in, what way does their work in design systems in particular fit. And at the same time, also thinking about AI and these new tools that are enabled by it. How do we kind of make sense of what's happening and how do we kind of move forward with optimism? That's really kind of the crux of my talk. So super excited to give that at Config in a couple of weeks. I'll be doing day 2 on the 22nd. So if you're watching that over the live stream, check that out.
Yeah, actually, that's pretty funny because as you can see, and as you already know, I'm French. So the date, it's translated, but that's the only content translated in the UI. So I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. I get what you are trying to do, but like, is it really worth, like just translating in French, just that, and everything else is in English. Anyway.
Hey, localization is hard.
It is hard.
It is very hard.
Sure. What do you know what it means? Like the double feature, Catherine?
Yeah. So Figma booked a lot of amazing speakers, and in the schedule there are double features of two folks kind of doing related talks. So Jane is talking about how does AI affect primarily research and user research. And then mine is more tilted on the DS side. And so they paired us up together to have kind of a 20 minutes for her talk, 20 minutes for my talk.
Cool. Okay, thanks for the explanation. So we have Christina who says that she can't wait to see you there. And I think Danny.
Yeah, super excited to see you there too, Christina.
And then
look at that. It's a typical design thing, right? When all of a sudden you have text overflow, what happens? And so, we're watching the design to engineering handoff in real time here.
Anyway,
yeah, they should have had AI build this UI component.
Yeah, well, we'll be all there to cheer you up while you're doing your speak for sure. Chris, you want to talk about yours a little bit?
Yeah, so Into Design Systems, now the Future of Design Systems conference. It's an online conference. My co-founder, Evan, and I are talking about AI and design systems and how to leverage it, what it means, kind of what tools are coming. We've spent a lot of time talking about this. And prior to November of last year, it was always sort of this black box. Like when we would sit there and have our whiteboarding sessions, we'd be like, all right, this is what Knapsack is going to look like, right? It's going to have like docs here and code here and design here. And then there's going to be this like cloud that is sort of dark and stormy that is like AI ML goes here. And I think that the really powerful thing that OpenAI and ChatGPT and even to a large degree Copilot showed us last year is that all this stuff is really possible now. And it's going to end up being very, very quickly ubiquitous in all the tools we use to manage our design and code. And so, looking at that from the perspective of somebody that builds design systems software, I get really excited about what the future looks like for our tooling. And so it's a talk about the tools, the ideas, the ways of working that are going to change as a result of all this. And, I guess like it's kind of like the future is now sort of talk where we get to look at some of the really practical ways that AI is changing the way we work with design systems, and even some of the less practical, more future thinking ways that this might work someday.
Sounds very cool. Nice.
I'm speaking Friday.
Sounds super exciting.
In the morning, I think.
So yeah, I actually have a question because I feel like this conference is more like Europe oriented, right? So
yeah, I mean the organizers, I think they're global organizers, but yeah, it is all CEST, which has been unique for me to make sure that I landed at the right time.
Yeah, well, it's always the struggle, right? Like when I've been thinking about, like having actually like the Design System Social Club on more like European friendly for obvious reason, but it's tricky to, have something that works for everybody for sure.
No, it's interesting, right? Because I think Sylvia, the conference organizer, is German, but I think that there's also, we work with a lot of folks in the UK. Design systems has definitely become like this very global thing. And I think that that's also cool because it lends a lot of different perspectives from all around the world. Look, being an American, things that are US centric, like it just kind of is my daily life, right? Like that's the in group. And so seeing people that aren't necessarily a part of that in group contributing to stuff like this, I love it.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. Okay, cool. Unfortunately, I don't have a conference lined up where I will be talking. You can all cross your fingers because I made a proposition for Denver Startup Week actually. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Apart from that, while we're still talking about the news, I just wanted to do like a quick shout out to Josh Harwood, because he created this Chrome extension called Figma UI Mod, which I think is very interesting for two things. Well, it does two things basically. One is export analytics as CSV. So basically, when I'm pretty sure that everybody knows now that in Figma, you can actually consult analytics about your Figma libraries. And so being able to export those things as CSV and using them in something else seems like a great idea. I feel like it's been years now that I heard this urban legend that you could actually export those things. Like there was like an API that Figma was, like just publishing for certain people so that you could actually get directly your stats, not in Figma, but in something else. I think it makes a lot of sense because like usually you want to have like one consolidated dashboard to actually, like get all of your metrics and stats and stuff like that. So I think it makes a lot of sense. Second thing is, which I think is interesting, is that Josh is basically trying to like change the UI of Figma to actually adjust it to, like his use and hopefully like other people uses. So I don't know. I mean, if I were Figma, I would probably like look into this and see like what it's trying to do and why, and maybe having like different profile, because I can understand how, like a user of a component library, for example, might have like a total different UI view than a maintainer or somebody like that. So anyway, have you seen this thing? Did you try it yet?
I haven't tried it yet, but it definitely is compelling. I think one of the things that most of us probably on the live stream have noticed using Figma is that their analytics tools are a little underpowered. And so even having some additional ways of leveraging them and exporting them, super helpful. So I think this makes a ton of sense.
I mean, why would you ever use Figma vanilla after this? No, it's the first time I heard about it was this morning, but it's cool. I want to check it out. And so I'm going to play with it when I get a few minutes this afternoon.
Cool. Okay. Do we have any questions? Well,
yeah. Do we want to go to the audience? What do y'all want to talk about? We've got some stuff in the queue in case there's not a lot of questions, but yeah, we'd love to hear what you have to say.
Well, somebody is asking, will you hold a list of guest recommendations? That's a cool idea. I didn't think about that, but maybe we can have that. Basically, you can reach out, like to us on Twitter or LinkedIn or, or even YouTube. Like if you have like guest recommendation, like I feel like we're all open, right?
You're gonna get like 100 people that are like, you should have Barack Obama on your live stream. Okay.
I'd love to hear his opinions on design systems.
On tokens, especially. And are they good for theming or what?
Right.
Okay. Well, there's also another thing that maybe we can actually show everybody is, as we mentioned, like the idea is really to have people submitting topics or questions or challenges and stuff like that. And we do have actually, let me just show that, but we do have a type form all ready for you all. So first of all, I'm trying to show, look at that. You can submit your proposal at tinyurl.com/dsfg-form. So that's one thing. And because we're really, really cool, and I was just playing with this tool, check it out. I even have
look, an on-screen QR code.
QR code for you so that you can actually just scan this thing. I don't know if it's professional, but it works. And so, yeah, I guess maybe Chris, do you want to talk a little bit about what we're looking for, like in terms of proposal?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny, the QR code thing. I was just in San Francisco for a conference and everybody had QR codes on their slides. And I was like, man, I got to go generate QR codes for all my slide decks. So anyway, the idea of the proposals is, deep dive topic, right? The intent of the design systems field guide is to have audience submitted questions that we get to jam about. And so it's whatever you want to know about design systems. And we're trying to have a relatively diverse perspective of folks that are in tooling and have a business perspective, folks in design, folks in engineering. And the idea is with a proposal is like, if we want to go deep, right? If there's something you want to explore, that could be a Figma plugin you want to learn more about. That could be, something about a public design system that you want to explore how it's constructed or built. That could be about, your favorite, YouTube broadcast about design systems, and sort of get a sense of opinions from other folks in the community that want to talk with you about this stuff. And so, if you're selected from this, you'll get invited onto the show. We'll get to a chance to have you talk for 10 to 15 minutes, and we'll discuss the thing you have to bring up. We want to try to do at least one of these an episode. And so, if you got some ideas, go ahead and submit them.
Thanks. And yeah, very well said. I don't think I personally have nothing else to add, but okay. So Robert is asking culture collaboration. Okay. I'm not sure I understand that question.
Yeah, can you elaborate?
Robert. And well, maybe Robert come back to us. Donnie is saying discussion on Apple's spatial design in relation to design system. That's a fun one. I feel like
that is a fun one. Way to go, Donnie! Always bringing the heat.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so like let's dive in here, right? I think that there's so it's interesting. This reminds me actually of this thing I saw this past week where one of the creators of the Unity engine was building video game worlds based on AI prompts. And so in a similar idea to like, how do you create something that is beyond 2D flat things on the internet, viewable in a web browser? Like, what does that look like? And there's this really interesting intersection between content, because you have to have assets, and then the actual generation of a UI in sort of like a spatial way. And this to me is the wedge that content has to become a major part of design systems. We've always talked about like content as copy and having like voice and tone guidelines, and some interface copy is an important part. Maybe images or videos is an important part of design systems, but we've never thought about like real asset management in design systems before. And I think that like spatial is really kind of pushing that envelope.
Yeah, totally agree. It's so funny because I feel like you obviously, like I want to say, I don't know, a big majority of the time, like design systems are really actually thinking about web first, probably, like it depends. Obviously, there's like exotic design systems or platforms, stuff like that are maybe like Android only or, iOS only or something like that. But it's basically like mainly web and then probably native. And then you have like the exotic stuff, right? And so for me, like the exotic stuff that I've experienced with was like email platform, for example, which is like slightly different than web, but potentially, like if you're working for material, you probably have, like a variant around like Android Auto. And so that's also like a different platform that you need to, people at Netflix obviously have, or, people like that also have, I say Netflix, but it could be like Disney Plus or what have you. But, it's basically like TV experience, like that is slightly different. So I think that makes it fun from, like a practitioner perspective, is to have like exotic platforms like that. But yeah, like definitely everything AR, VR, or spatial design now.
Just to pile on that, like it's like my brother and I have this saying when we do a lot of outdoor adventures, and when those outdoor adventures become really, really hard, but you're still like realizing that you're skiing on a mountain or something like that, we call it type 2 fun. Dealing with like native systems and design systems is definitely type 2 fun still, right? Like there's really only a couple of structures in native that are really well suited to design systems. And a lot of them are like pretty modern and pretty Apple centric. And so I'm hopeful that with Apple's spatial design stuff that they implement a lot of stuff from like Swift UI as a part of that, because that actually is pretty well suited for use in design systems where lots of other things aren't. And it is interesting because you end up in this like kind of class of design systems where there's sort of like web, native, and then everything else. And everything else is like, it can be living room where you're talking about like smart TVs or kiosks or something like that. Or it could be things like, for example, we talk about, we spent a lot of time with a heavy equipment manufacturer that like their UIs in their like equipment and their UIs in their warehouses, they all wanted to be a part of their design system. And those are really hard problems still. And actually, like real quick, Christoph, to your point about email, the wonderful thing about email is it is still HTML and CSS. And so being able to do something like mustache templating inside of a design system tool is not really that big of a leap. And so we've actually had lots of folks bring their email into Knapsack as a part of their design system platform.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's been interesting for me, considering the Vision OS and how it could relate to design systems, is that at DoorDash, one of the things that was interesting is we were one of the few companies that really invested heavily on native design systems. Because I think one of the challenges is, as a platform, Apple is very much it feels like they can outrun you in terms of what they provide as like the design systems provider for their platform. And they have very tight control over what it is that they're trying to guide all the UI built on their systems to be. And over the last few years, one of the things that's been really interesting for us to understand kind of in that space is that they've been really tightening up and making the sort of design systems primitives. One of the things that you alluded to, Chris, was in Swift UI, I think they have very strong sort of concepts about like, their semantic type system is really great now. They have really strong understanding of how to think about semantic colors and, making things like dark mode built into the platform and supporting that built into the platform. I think one of the things that's been interesting seeing this Vision OS stuff is that in a lot of ways that build up over the last half decade around making their UI paradigms more portable, more semantic, and more design systems oriented was a strategy to be able to have content from day one for Vision OS, so that things that are basically like just apps and sort of products that lots of us are already building today, those things can just exist on day one. And then like we can gradually sort of go to a place where we're building more sort of augmented reality native experiences, but starting with this platform. So in a way, I think like design systems and the design systemsification of Apple's like platform is like a strategy that they use to make Vision like kind of happen. So I think that's interesting to see from the outside.
Totally. I'm honestly all for it. I'm not really much of an Apple guy myself. Like I have a MacBook. I like it. I have an Android phone. Like, I don't know if I should actually admit that online. I think that like everybody will sign off the live stream, but the idea behind like, how do you have a unified sort of set of patterns that represents your UI across your ecosystem is great. One of the hard parts about native support inside of Knapsack, for example, is there's something like 30 frameworks. And so what's nice about the web is, even as like open and broad as the web is, there's really like 7 frameworks, maybe 8 if you really want to get creative. But that covers about 90% of your use cases if you support, React, Vue, Angular, PHP, and a couple of other things, right? Web components. The rest of it is kind of like very much at the margins. Whereas, in native, there's not really like a lot of frameworks that have that degree of ownership, and you have to support like 20 of them to really get what you want. And one of the hardest things to support inside of design systems software is that ability to have like some sort of portability between languages. It's definitely something that like we want to solve, but man, is it a hard problem.
Yeah. The other thing, I mean, what I usually say to people, like I feel like the default is always web because web is a standard, when actually iOS and Android are proprietary platforms. Yep. And so obviously like it just makes more sense to invest in a standard versus, like something that, like something that can be basically like taking out of view like at any minute because, like Alphabet or Apple decided to do things differently, And so, yeah, that's interesting. Another point that I wanted to raise is that I'm particularly excited about one thing is that as a designer, like, okay, a little bit of backstory, but or something to add to, like something you might not know about me is that I'm also a musician. I'm also a sound engineer. And so at the very beginning of my career, I really wanted to be a sound designer. And what I'm particularly excited about with now, like Apple, like Vision Pro and like spatial design, is that it's so interesting. It's like from one device to the other, also from one platform to the other, the expectations in terms of sound is largely different, right? Nobody wants any sound apart from a video on a website. Okay, now we know that. Like on a application on your smartphone, it's already a little bit different. But I feel like, like Vision Pro and like spatial design is really the place where actually it's going to be a hard requirement to also have audio, because that is part of your experience. And so that is very different. And that is going to be a very different context for designers. And I feel like in the design system world, I personally experience as like motion is usually an afterthought. And so, it's like, even though like you might actually say that it's, very important, like a lot of things, but I feel like sound is even further away down, down the pipeline to actually be a priority to actually integrate that in your design system. Donnie is making a comment too about haptic. I expect haptic to be more included into these new experiences. Yeah, probably, but that's interesting, right? It's like we're 99% vision right now, and maybe like 0.5% sound, and like even less about haptics. But and what about smell and taste? I don't know.
But downloadable beer samples.
Yeah.
The moment that happens, like I'm in. Evan, if you're listening, I got to work that comment in there. It's my co-founder's favorite thing that he says is an impossibility on the web, is to get the ability to create downloadable beer samples. Donnie, kind of to your point though, I think that accessible inputs and accessible interfaces are really challenging, because the broad scale of accessibility is you can think about like what it might look like, and then there's the reality of like what it actually looks like, right? You might be able to say that the best sort of interface prompt is a voice prompt, right? Like we all live in the world of Star Trek, where we press a button and then we speak in natural language, and then a system does something that we want it to do. That's great if you can hear and speak, and also probably if you speak English. I think that there's other stuff around like haptics, which is great if you have some sort of like visual impairment, or you need some other sort of solution that doesn't necessarily represent things visually or in audio. But if you have issues with touch, it can be really awful. And in fact, I used to disable like Rumble on all my gamepads and stuff like that, because I found it like distracting and weird. And so I think that it's hard, right? Because we're going to live in a world where lots of different people with lots of different abilities need to be able to all interface with these systems and devices. And I think it's pretty unexplored, right? I was actually talking to Catherine before the show about how I'm kind of become obsessed about like what interface design looks like for AI. And a big part of this is that we've basically decided that the way that we interface with AI is a text box or a suggestion engine. And that's sort of it. Like, what new interfaces do we actually want to create inside of AI that makes it like richer than here's an empty input field, or here's something that's like 50% washed out that you could press tab and have it autocomplete for you, right? Like, what are the other interfaces that exist within AI? And I think that there's this interesting like emergent idea of, as we start to move beyond the web and visual medium and into AR, VR, and into the ideas of like, how do we interface with AIs? Like, do our interfaces become more concrete, or do they become more transparent? And that's something that I hope transparency wins in that battle. But it is an interesting kind of idea.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely one of those things where I feel like it's easy to see a world right now where we're saturated in this very unstructured sort of paradigm of working with AI, aka like that chat input, to say that is the way that it will go. But there's, I think, a lot of opportunity to figure out where do those sort of sides of that spectrum match together to kind of be applied in the right use cases. Because I think there are places where you need more of that open-endedness, that exploratory ability to work with an AI or an AI chat agent. But then you also need more direct ability to kind of manipulate what it's bringing to you and what it's working with you on. And so I think there's an opportunity to kind of find that middle ground for various use cases.
Yeah, and Donnie, if you want to jam on this, I'd love to spend more time talking about it, because I'm like, for example, I asked Gartner this, like, we're, Gartner customers, right? And so I asked like the whole analyst team at Gartner, like, what are the new interfaces you're seeing? And probably like the Gartner mafia is going to descend into my living room at any moment for talking about this. But they had no really clear answers. And a lot of it was like, hey, like, we're all still trying to figure this out, right? And so what do interface designs look like? One of the things that I saw that was really interesting the other day, and kind of unique, was something that Josh, one of the knapsackers, talked about, where he was talking about how you can prompt an AI, but it's rare for an AI to ask you questions back. And I thought that was a really interesting idea, where like you make a prompt, and then in order to give you a better answer, the AI asks you questions about your own prompt in order to gather more data that's going to retrieve you more relevant information. And I thought that, like, look, it's still a text box, but the interesting thing about that text box is it's not just like an open-ended part of conversation. You're actually having somebody respond to you with the idea of like, let me get more information in a structured way that is going to provide you with better results.
Yep.
Yeah.
By
That's
the way,
definitely. Oh, sorry.
go ahead, Catherine. Yeah, go first.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm covering in my talk is a section on kind of future visions of where AI and design tooling can go when brought together. And part of it is figuring out, how do you make it a tool that helps you kind of expand your thinking and be more creative and thoughtful about like what sort of design explorations or paths you go down, and having that ability to have the AI not just maybe take generalized understanding of design and what you're trying to achieve, but also the sort of internal org specific context of here's some things that we've tried, and here's the ways that it's worked or not worked in the past, and then here's maybe a construction of what you're trying to achieve in a actual like component or screen. I think that's a area of opportunity that a lot of tools right now are very one way. You ask it for something and it gives you it back, and that's it. I think there's more opportunity to kind of figure out, how do you make it a collaborator versus something that you're just requesting of something and getting something back.
Yeah, it all feels like, for me, like it's more like, it feels like we're basically designers now looking at this technology and say, how do we actually use this thing? Like,
right.
How is it going to work for humans? It's cool, but but anyway, Donnie, I think like we can probably do like an off Figma config with you, and maybe having you like at the like the next episode of this, and maybe you can like share your thoughts next month or something like that. I think it would be fun to have you here.
Yeah, so we have show like the design systems field guide. We pretty much talk about AI.
It's sign of the times right now, but I'm sure that like obviously, if we're not, that's actually another part of design system that I would love to talk about at some point, is that, do you feel like it's the job of a design system team to not just be reactive to what's happening, like on, like the product teams in your organization and stuff like that? And I feel like this is kind of like my ideal scenario and my ideal state, where the design system team actually have time to research stuff, like being able to actually go and see what's happening, what's coming up, like what are the things that we might invest in later, and not just being reactive, but being able to propose new things, or already have like take the pulse on different things. So does that happen to you? Is it like just a dream because like you never have time to get there, or do you have any experience?
I think it's a challenge across a lot of design systems teams in organizations today, but also lots of adjacent teams. I think there is a hunger to have the space to be ahead and to kind of figure out how do we provide value by anticipating versus reacting. But I think in the sort of daily business context, especially of hyper growth, very fast moving companies, sometimes it can get lost. But the art of leading in those situations is kind of figuring out how to get that balance while still attending to the needs of the day. So it definitely is a challenge, but I think there are spaces to do that for sure.
It's interesting you talking about that because when we first started selling Knapsack to teams, to big enterprise companies, right? A lot of the conversation we had was about building better software. Automate away the mundane, take away a bunch of that time that is spent on what represents vanity metrics like velocity and stuff like that, to actually being focused on how do you create like happier teams that are able to do more rewarding, interesting work. And that is definitely my preferred pitch for design systems. Like I like that idea that we're able to build better software because we can spend time on things that aren't relitigating the accessibility standards or performance implications of our button choices. But the hard part about that is in the economic times we find ourselves in, where, as Catherine, you alluded to, lots of layoffs in the industry, et cetera. There's people that are losing budget. And so they're not able to either hire the people they were expecting to hire, or they're having to cut their team, but the roadmap doesn't get smaller. And so the idea is definitely like do more with less. And so the shift in conversation, while it still works for us as a company in terms of being able to sell software, it's not the preferred conversation for me. The preferred conversation is definitely about, let's all be happier with the way that we build software. And as a result of being happier, we build better software, instead of like, let's just figure out how to make velocity go up. Because I really don't feel like great products are necessarily about velocity. And I do think that for a little while there, you were starting to see the cracks show in that mindset in product organizations to basically say like, well, hey, wait, maybe this isn't about shipping more. Maybe this is about shipping meaningful or better. I know there's a lot of like stuff about COVID that gets into this about like, hey, all these experiences that weren't online had to be online. And so everything was about like getting shit out the door as fast as you could there for a while. But I don't know. I still have this like ray of hope that's why what people ultimately want out of their design system, but it may not be the way it gets in the door.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I actually had a conversation, around those lines when I was working on IDS, the Intuit design system, with our content strategist, and it was all about like, okay, so design systems is like basically like you work more efficiently. Ideally, it's about quality over quantity. So it's not to ship more, it's to ship better. And so in that sense, I feel like this is like, R&D time and resources is kind of like part of that package, right? It's like being able to actually devote time on things that matter more than, is that the right drop shadow,
Yeah,
but,
exactly. I mean, I have a close friend that talks about design systems as a Trojan horse for culture change inside of your organization.
Yep.
How if you get people rallying around systems concepts, it's suddenly a lot easier to talk about why product metrics related to like lines of code don't actually really matter. And how when you start to think about like systems of people that feel like they're doing their best work, usually that equates to more user value. And so those aren't necessarily the readily apparent things that you sell a design system into your organization for, but it can be a vehicle for that sort of change inside of your organization.
Yep. Very true. Cool. I think we covered a lot of ground already for this first episode. So I'm actually excited for the the following ones, and I hope that we'll do that, for a long time. Do you have any final thoughts, Catherine or Chris, before we wrap this up?
No, I think this is really fun. I think having the community give us questions to jam on and sort of think through. I love the format, so hopeful for more.
Great.
Yeah, and hey, thanks to all the guests for showing up for this first one. Like, it's definitely an experiment. We want to try to see what sort of engagement we get with content like this. But being able to speak live in front of people, I don't know. I feel like I settled into it. Like I was definitely anxious at the start. Like I always get sweaty palms before podcasting, but man, oh man, like live content's weird. I gotta like comb my hair.
Yeah. Thanks, Aiden. This is a great use of the last 45 minutes. Well, we're all happy here, and hopefully, like tell your friends. Next time we'll get even more people and even more questions. But yeah, it's definitely fun for me, like to do that live, and I feel like it's a great mix of like between like talking about topics, but also like being able to, like when you do a conference, it's hard to actually really have questions, and like you want to engage with the audience. You don't want to talk for 45 minutes by yourself and have a monologue, I think. So yeah, hopefully this is just the beginning of something great. Again, crossing my fingers for that too. But I guess we need to wrap this up for once. The thing that I said at the end of Design Social Club is stay fresh cheese bags, but it's like we need to come up with our own way.
Catchphrase, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We'll have to think
I'm gonna have
about
to
that.
Brainstorm that one.
Yeah, I know. Well, in the meantime, it was great to chat with you all, and I guess we'll see you next month.
Hey, thanks all. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.